Picture this. A father-in-law unknowingly sleeps with his daughter-in-law who's disguised as a prostitute. She gets pregnant, he orders her execution, and then she reveals he's the father. Sounds like a soap opera, right? Wrong. It's Genesis 38. Today we're diving deep into one of the Bible's most controversial chapters, the story of Judah and Tamar. We'll unpack why this scandalous tale made it into scripture, what Seventh-day Adventist commentaries reveal about its meaning, and how this messy story actually points to redemption. By the end, you'll understand why this isn't just ancient drama, but a profound lesson about justice, righteousness, and God's grace working through human failure. So let me turn to someone who's spent considerable time studying this passage. Help us understand why Genesis 38 has made biblical scholars so uncomfortable for centuries.
You're absolutely right about the discomfort. According to Stephen D. Mathewson's exegetical study, many commentators have described Genesis 38 using terms like unconnected, independent, interruption. Some have called it an alien element, suddenly and arbitrarily thrust into a record which it serves only to disturb.
Wait, so biblical scholars are basically saying this chapter doesn't belong?
That's exactly what many have argued. In fact, this discomfort goes way back, as far as the 2nd century BC. The writer of the Book of Jubilees actually repositioned this story later in the Joseph narrative. And Josephus completely omitted Genesis 38 when he wrote about the Joseph story in his Antiquities.
So even ancient historians were like, nope, we're not dealing with this one.
Exactly. But here's the thing. I think they're missing the point entirely. This story isn't an interruption, it's essential. Let me walk you through what actually happens, because the details matter.
Please do, because I have a feeling there's more here than meets the eye.
So it starts with Judah, one of Jacob's 12 sons, the same guy who suggested selling Joseph into slavery instead of killing him. After that incident, Judah leaves his brothers and settles near a place called Adullam.
Already we're seeing someone making questionable choices.
Right. And then he makes what the page content describes as an ungodly and unwise marriage to a Canaanite woman named Shua. This was significant because, according to the sources, marriage with Canaanite women had been consistently discouraged among the patriarchs.
So he's already going against family tradition and probably divine guidance.
Exactly. They have 3 sons, Er, Onan, and Shelah. Judah arranges for his oldest son, Er, to marry a woman named Tamar. But here's where things get dark. The Bible simply says Er was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and God killed him.
We're not told what did specifically?
Nope. The text is deliberately vague. But whatever it was serious enough for divine judgment. Now, this is where ancient customs come into play. There was something called levirate marriage.
Okay, I need you to explain that because I'm guessing most people don't know what that means.
Levirate marriage was later codified in Deuteronomy 25 v 5:10. Basically, if a man died before providing sons to his wife, it was the duty of his brothers to marry her and give her children. The whole point was to carry on the deceased brother's name and lineage.
So Tamar gets passed to the second son, Onan.
Right. But Onan knew that any children wouldn't legally be his, they'd be considered heirs. So according to the text, when he went into his brother's wife, he admitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. He deliberately prevented conception.
And God wasn't having that either.
Nope. The text says, the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. So now Tamar is twice widowed through no fault of her own.
This poor woman. What happens next?
Well, by custom, she should have been given to the 3rd son, Shelah. But Judah was afraid. He didn't want to lose a 3rd son. So he sends Tamar back to her father's house, promising she'll marry Shelah when he's old enough. But according to the Avondale Memorial SDA Church study, Judah never intended to keep that promise.
So she's stuck in limbo, legally considered Shelah's wife, but with no husband and no future.
Exactly. The SDA commentary notes that being sent back to her family would have created a stigma for Tamar. She was a wife with no husband, and her future did not look positive. She was trapped by a system that was supposed to protect her.
And this is where the story takes that dramatic turn, right?
Oh, yes. Years pass, Judah's wife dies, and he's traveling to Timnah for sheep shearing. Tamar hears about this and realizes Shelah is now grown, but she still hasn't been given to him. So she takes matters into her own hands.
This is where she disguises herself as a prostitute?
Right. She covers her face with a veil and positions herself along Judah's path. When he sees her, he doesn't recognize his daughter-in-law and solicits her services, offering a young goat as payment.
But she's smart about it. She asks for collateral, right?
Exactly. She requests his seal, cord, and staff as a pledge. These were essentially his ancient ID, items that would uniquely identify him. The SDA commentary notes that his identity was now in the hands of a harlot, who we know, of course, to be Tamar.
So she's got the evidence. What happens when the pregnancy is discovered?
3 months later, word gets back to Judah that his daughter-in-law is pregnant from prostitution. And here's where the hypocrisy really shows. He immediately orders her to be burned to death.
Wait, the same guy who just slept with a prostitute is condemning her for prostitution?
The irony is incredible, isn't it? The SDA study notes, it is interesting that Judah was so quick to judge and condemn Tamar, yet he himself was not leading a life that was fitting for a spiritual Israelite leader.
But then comes the mic drop moment.
Oh yes. As she's being led out to execution, Tamar sends a message to Judah, I am pregnant by the man who owns these. And she presents his seal, cord, and staff.
I can only imagine his face in that moment.
The text says he immediately recognized the items and declared, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. He halts the execution and acknowledges his failure.
So, the person who appeared to be in the wrong was actually the most righteous one in the situation.
That's exactly the point. And here's where it gets really significant. Tamar gives birth to twins, Perez and Zerah. According to multiple sources in our content, King David and Jesus are descended from the bloodline of Perez.
Wait, so this scandalous story is actually part of the messianic lineage?
Absolutely. Matthew 1:3 specifically mentions Tamar in Jesus' genealogy. The Bible Study Tool's commentary notes that, in spite of the treachery and deceit, mercy and righteousness ultimately prevail.
This is blowing my mind. So what do the SDA commentaries specifically say about all this?
Well, the Ellen G. White estate has extensive commentaries on Genesis, including Volume 1, which covers Genesis to Deuteronomy. The SDA Bible commentary provides what they call largely an exegetical study of each passage in Scripture for ministers, Bible instructors, and teachers.
And Ellen White herself, what insights did she offer?
The page content shows that Ellen G. White's writings are available in 137 different languages, and that millions look to her writings for guidance. Her commentary on Genesis 38 would be found in the EDW SDA Bible Commentary Volume 1, though the specific insights aren't detailed in our source material.
But there's something fascinating in the Matthew Henry commentary that the SDA study references.
Yes. It suggests that though Tamar was a Canaanite, she may have embraced the true religion and believed the promise made to Abraham and his seed, particularly that of the Messiah, who was to descend from the loins of Judah.
So she might have been motivated by faith, believing she could be part of God's plan?
That's the theory. The commentary says she was earnestly desirous to have a child by one of that family, that she might have the honor, or at least stand fair for the honor, of being the mother of the Messiah.
That completely reframes her actions, doesn't it?
It does. The commentary concludes that her sinful practice was pardoned and her good intention was accepted, which magnifies the grace of God. But it's careful to note this can by no means be admitted to justify or encourage the like.
So we're not supposed to use this as a blueprint for behavior, but we can see God's grace working through it.
Exactly. And this brings us to why modern scholars like Berend Wielenga argue that Genesis 38 isn't an interruption at all. His 2024 study suggests it's essential for understanding the redemptive historical narrative of Genesis.
How so?
Wielenga's research focuses on what he calls the theocentric character of redemptive history, and how Genesis 38 shows God's plan working even through human failure and moral complexity. It's not despite the mess, but through it.
That's a profound way to look at it. So what does this mean for us today?
Well, I think it challenges our neat categories of good and bad. Tamar appears to be the villain. She deceives, she engages in what looks like prostitution, but she's actually fighting for justice in a system that failed her.
And Judah, who should be the righteous patriarch, is the one who fails to keep his word and acts hypocritically.
Right. But here's the beautiful thing. Even Judah experiences redemption. When confronted with the truth, he doesn't double down or make excuses. He admits his failure and acknowledges Tamar's righteousness.
So it's a story about second chances and God's ability to work through our failures.
Absolutely. And the fact that this messy, complicated story leads directly to the lineage of David and ultimately Jesus shows that God's redemptive plan doesn't require perfect people or perfect circumstances.
You know what strikes me? This story is incredibly relevant for our time when we're constantly dealing with moral complexity and situations that don't fit neat categories.
That's such an important point. We live in a world where justice and mercy often seem to conflict, where good people sometimes have to make difficult choices in broken systems.
And maybe that's why this story has made people uncomfortable for thousands of years. It forces us to grapple with moral ambiguity.
Exactly. It's easier to have clear heroes and villains, but Genesis 38 shows us that real life and God's work in real life is far more complex and ultimately more hopeful than our simple categories allow.
So when we step back from all the drama and scandal, what's the core message here?
I think it's that God's grace is bigger than our failures. His justice is more nuanced than our judgments. And his redemptive plan can work through the most unlikely circumstances and imperfect people.
And that sometimes the person who appears to be breaking the rules might actually be the most righteous one in the room.
Yes. Tamar's story reminds us to look deeper, to consider the systems and circumstances that drive people's choices, and to be careful about rushing to judgment.
Here's what I want people to take away from this. The next time you encounter a biblical story that makes you uncomfortable, don't skip it. Lean into it. Ask why it's there.
Because often those uncomfortable stories are the ones that have the most to teach us about grace, redemption, and the complex ways God works in our world.
Genesis 38 isn't a scandal to be hidden. It's a masterclass in how God's love and justice work together in ways we might never expect. Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful stories come from the messiest circumstances.